Hello, welcome to my knitting studio. Welcome to episode 22 of Knitter Matters. It's a pleasure to have you here, and if you're watching later, welcome to you too. I'm Cheryl Lampard. I'm an image consultant with my company Style Matters International, and throughout my life I've had two passions, sewing and knitting. I used to be the owner of a lovely yarn shop in Brighton, England, and one of the real joys of owning a shop like that, apart from the wonderful yarn, was the fact that I got to teach people how to knit. And it's my pleasure to do that now via a different platform. Please put any questions or comments that you have in the thread below. I can't actually see them while we're doing the Facebook Live, but I will answer them as soon as possible afterwards. And feel free at any time during the week to post questions, post photographs of your work. As long as it's knitting related, I'd love to see it. And any questions, feel free to do that. That's what the page is there for. So let's get on with the two topics for today. And I'm going to ask the camera to turn to the desk so that we can see what we're doing. Before we actually start on today's topic, which is all about drop stitch techniques, I want to talk a little bit about yarn substitution. So maybe you have a pattern, say, maybe you don't want to do it in the same yarn as described in the pattern. Maybe you don't like the colour range. Maybe the yarn isn't in your budget. Maybe it's a design that's shown in wool, you can't wear wool. Or, as sometimes happens, yarn is now discontinued. Well, designers use the specified yarn, whatever it might be. Let's go here, for example. The designer here has used a kid silk for this particular beautiful shawl. And depending on what the pattern is and who the designer is, they may be using a certain yarn because for a specified reason. They might be sponsored by the yarn company or the pattern company. They may have a preference. All sorts of reasons that could be. Now, I'm showing you this book, which is a beautiful book. It's called Victorian Lace Today by Jane Sowerby. It's a lovely book. But I want to show you an example of why just swapping out a DK yarn for another DK or a worsted yarn for a worsted yarn isn't gonna work. There are other considerations. So you can see here Jane's done this lovely shawl here, and she's done this in a kid mohair. She's also done the same pattern here, but in a silk smooth yarn. It looks quite different. There is one difference here that I will point out for the authenticity. She's added a ruffle here, but that is the only difference. But the look and feel of the garment is quite different. So you need to consider that. So for example, I did two swatches here, which we've seen before. It's exactly the same pattern. It's the same number of stitches other than the border stitches. This one is in a cotton yarn. This one is in a Aran wool. Completely different look, completely different feel to the different yarns and to the finished work too. So let me go into a bit more detail about that sort of thing. So here, for example, because this is a whole subject in itself. So we have this handy dandy guide, which I've shown you before. And I can post it again if you need it. It's just off the internet, but it's super useful. I know these two yarns are both a worsted weight. So let's say my pattern is in a worsted weight. I know it's a medium yarn. All good there. This guide tells me the stitch range that I need and the needle range. That's good too. But let me look at the ball bands. So I know that it's within my stitch range. Let me have a look. All this information is on the ball bands. This yarn is Woodlands by Mary Maxim. And don't forget, if you buy anything from the Mary Maxim website, when it comes to checkout, if you put the promo code Cheryl in, you'll get 20% off of one item. Just don't forget to put that code in. Sorry, my label's gone a bit curly there. Then you'll get 20% off, and it'll be the highest price item. And that can be from anywhere that you're watching from. Okay, So our ball, we know the I can use this with the same needle size. That is compatible. The gauge is similar, but look at the yardage. On my acrylic and alpaca woodlands yarn with Mary Maxim, I've got 200 yards there to 100 grams. 200 yards. Okay, it says here. On this merino wool from Pearl Soho, I've got 164 yards. It's still 100 grams. 164 yards, 200 yards. Okay, so that's something I need to think about too. It's the yarn weight to the yardage or the meterage. Because that leaves me, if I'm going to knit something in this, I'm going to need more yarn, depending what it is. Over the course of a garment, those 36 yards of differentiation don't mean much in themselves, but over the course of a garment, I could need quite a bit more of this. And it's going to affect the actual heaviness of the garment, how that feels. So that's something, that's a small red flag. It's not a bad red flag, I just need to be aware of it. The other thing is I need to be aware of the composition, because that could affect, that could make a big difference. This one, my woodlands yarn, I can machine wash this. And it says so here in my care instructions. This is machine washable. So if I'm doing that for a children's thing or an Afghan, that would be perfect. This one, I've got to hand wash cold and lay flat to dry. Well, I need to lay them both flat to dry, but just knowing how I launder them, that could make a difference. So that's another thing I need to think about. And then obviously there's the composition of the yarn. This one is acrylic and alpaca. So I'm going to get nice stitch definition from it, but I'm going to get a softer, drapier garment. This one is 100% merino wool, and there's a twist. You can see how differently it's spun. There's a twist to this yarn. So I'm going to get really good stitch definition on this, and I'm going to get a sturdier fabric. So if I want something a bit softer and drapier, this isn't probably going to give it to me, but this will. So there's a lot of other things you need to consider too, but those are three of the most important things that you have to consider when you're doing yarn substitutions for a garment. There is a really good website called yarnsub.com, yarnsub.com. And when you go to that website, you can actually put in the yarn that the pattern is in. You just type the yarn in and it'll come up with various substitutes. And it'll give all the information that I've just given you, the yardage, the composition, the needle size. And then you can make a comparison as to how you think that would work with your garment. But, and I've said it before and I'm going to keep saying it, it's really important to do your gauge swatches. It's always important to do that, but it's even more important now because that will help you determine how the garment is going to, the finished knitting is going to work. So never skip that gauge swatch, and certainly if you're swapping yarn, it's essential. And you can use the swatch to wash it and see how that handles as well. Okay, so that's a few tips on yarn substitution. Right, let's get on now to what we really want to talk about today, which is drop stitch techniques. There's essentially two ways to do this. Elongated stitches, and they use yarn overs or wraps around the needle. This seafoam pattern, which is really quite a good name for it, is basically just several rows of knit, and then on one of the rows, every so often, you put a varying number of wraps around. Now, you don't just do that all in one go. Here, you wrap once, then you knit a stitch, then it's twice, you knit a stitch 3 times, 4 times, whatever. Knit a few more just basic knit stitches, and then you do the same, repeat. And then you do another couple of rows of, I think it's 3 rows of knit altogether. Yes, you do one on the wrong side, then one right side again, and wrong side. So you're back to where you started from, but then you start again from doing the wraps on the edge and so on to make this variegated pattern. I've stretched this out as much as possible so you can see how these yarn overs work. It's a really nice idea, and this would be lovely in a sort of a cotton yarn or a silky chainette yarn. It would be really nice in that for a summer top or a breezy cover up, something like that. you do, as you knit it, it looks completely different as you knit it, and you need to kind of tug this out as you do it to really see how that works. And of course I've blocked this so you can really see. So that's a way to use elongated stitches. I'm going to show you another sample here, and then I'm going to show you how to do it. So this is a really easy elongated stitch piece of stitch work. This would be great if you're just doing a really simple, say, stockinette sweater or garment, something like that, and you want to sort of just relieve that solid stockinette. Or maybe you want to let the yarn do the work. So it might be, you might be using a variegated yarn or one of those lovely hand-dyed yarns where it's the yarn that's doing the talking. But you could use this as an accent detail. You could use this above the rib. You could use it along a sleeve somewhere, wherever you wanted to. And it's a really simple thing to do. This is just basically one yarn over. I'm going to show you how to do it in a second. Whenever you do these kind of elongated stitch patterns, you need to start with a platform so that you can actually see really, so it shows off and defines the stitches. So here I've done a row of, if you will, reverse stocking stitch on the right side, then I've done my row of yarn overs, and then I've done another row of reverse stocking stitch, and then I've just left a gap and done it again. So I'm going to show you how we do that with my sample. I'll leave that there in case we want to come back to it. Okay, let me just get myself into position. I've done a little sample swatch here where I've just done a bit of stockinette stitch here, and I've finished at the end of a right side row, because what I want to do now is do that first kind of platform row. So I'm going to just do a row of knit. Normally on this side I'd be doing purl stitches. I'm going to do a row of knit stitches. Okay. I really love these techniques. You can actually really it's such a simple way of putting some decorative features in. It's also a way of lengthening the garment too, if you need to. And you're not disrupting the number of stitches. You're not increasing, you're not doing anything like that, so you don't have to think about that. Okay, so I've done my kind of platform row there, as you can see. Now, I'm just going to do a knit stitch at the edge here. And I'm not going to make that too tight. Normally I give that little tug, but in this instance I'm not, because I need to do my yarn over. So I'm going to do a yarn over, knit my stitch, yarn over, knit my stitch. It's just one. Where did I go? I knitted my stitch. Yarn over, knit stitch, yarn over, knit stitch, yarn over, knit stitch, so on and so on. You could do more than one wrap. You're going to get quite a long stitch if you do that. I'm just going to do it with one yarn over. On this needle size and this yarn, it's enough to illustrate what I want to do. Okay. On the row back, you are not knitting the yarn over. So you're actually doubling the amount of stitches that you've got on your needle, but you're not going to knit them all. It's quite liberating to drop stitches sometimes. And this is one of those times. Okay. So I'm at the end of my row. I'll do a yarn over there too, and that first stitch I'm going to keep loose. Normally I hate a loose stitch at the end, but you need that here. So I'm going to knit the stitches. Again, I'm going to do a knit stitch on the wrong side row because I want this second row of knit around my yarn over. So knit. Now I'm going to let that go off the needle. I'm going to knit. I'm going to let that go off the needle. I'm going to knit. Let that go off the needle. Already you can see, I'm going to let that go off the needle. Don't get so clever with it that you think, oh, I'll just let it go, because that's when you drop stitches, which, as we'll see in a minute, it's not the end of the world. But you want that yarn over to come off, and you're knitting the knit stitch, remember? Yarn over goes off. Often in a pattern, you're knitting the yarn over to make a hole. We're not making a hole, we're making an elongated stitch. And so on to the end of the row, and I will go to the end of the row. I know it's boring watching me knit, but I want to show you what it looks like the other side. Okay. Just be careful not to knit the yarn overs if you're talking while you're doing it, as I am. Got to remember just to knit the knits. Oops. Okay. Now you can see, and give that a bit of a, tug that out a bit. You can see that that's looking the same pretty much. It is the same. It's exactly what I did there. And you could do a few more rows of stockinette stitch and do another one of these. You could just do one after your ribbing, something like that. You can put that in whenever you want. It's not going to alter the stitch count at all, but it's a really nice feature, especially if you've got an interesting coloured yarn. You can really show that off then. Okay, so that's an easy way to do an elongated stitch pattern. Let's get that out the way. Now I want to show you how we're going to do a dropped stitch design. Let me have a sip of my water. Okie doke. So the dreaded knit one, drop one that every newbie knitter is familiar with. But here's where you can do it and make it decorative and really enjoy dropping those stitches. So you could do this either side of a cable. I've just done 4 stitches of stockinette stitch, I should say there. But you need to just define the edges of your bands, if you will. I could easily do this as a cable if I wanted to. I'm just showing you this because it was simple enough to do. So to define your stitches either side of your band or your cable of stockinette stitch, you need to knit. You need to work into the back of the loop. So on the knit row, I'm going to knit into the back. On the first stitch and the 4th stitch, I've got 4 stitches here. Whatever your band width is, you would knit into the back loops on the knit rows and purl into the back loops on the purl rows. One thing that's really, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So one thing that you really need to do here is, unlike the elongated stitch where we're just doing a yarn over, we're not actually laddering the work. We're laddering the work here. We're actually knitting this stitch and then dropping it. You need to do a yarn over at the start of where you want your laddering to be. So I just did a few rows of garter stitch here, but this could be rib, this could be whatever you want it to be. But on the first row of this, I've got to do a yarn over here, because if I don't, when I ladder my work, it's going to go down into my rib or my garter stitch. You may want that, but if you don't want that, you need to do a yarn over, because once you get ladder that, it's going to stop at the yarn over. It's not going to go any further. I'll show you what I'm talking about right here. So here's one I did earlier for Blue Peter fans. My British friends will know what that means. British friends of a certain age will know what that means anyway. So here's my little sample piece. I've done my yarn overs there. You see there's a hole, and we've done yarn overs before. We did them last week when we talked about buttonholes. So here's my yarn over, and I want that hole there, because in a minute I'll show you what happens, and this is so liberating. But let me just show you. So I'm going to knit into the back of my loop there for that first one. 1, 2, then I'm going to knit into the back of the loop again. For ease of identifying where my drop stitch is going to be, I've done it as a purl, but you could just carry on doing it as a knit one. I just found it easier to make the separation. I'm going to knit into my back loop, knit, knit, knit into my back loop, just a simple purl there. Okay, knit, give myself some more yarn from my yarn bowl, knit, knit, knit into the back loop, and you see that actually gives a really quite a nice defined edge. It's quite a nice stitch to do anyway. if you want to define a pattern. Knit into the back loops, knit, knit, knit into my back loops. That's just a simple nip stitch because it's my edge stitch. I'm going to show you what I do on this row, on the reverse row, the row coming back. Knit stitch because that's my row. So purling into the back. Literally, you might have to just twist your work like this, but you're grabbing that and purling it like that. Okay. Purl, purl. And again, you can pull that out a bit if you can't quite find it. You're grabbing that from the back. Now I'm going to do my knit because that's where my drop stitch is going to be. Purl into the back, purl, purl, purl into the back, knit, purl. Can't wait to start dropping the stitches. It's exciting when you know you can do it. Okay, nearly there. So that's how you would build up your work before you're going to drop the stitches. Right. Now, if this were my last row, I might, before I finish off, on this one I've done a few rows of garter stitch. I actually did a yarn over there again, just as I dropped the stitch, and then on the row back, I knitted into the back of it, just to keep it nice and neat. But here's what we're going to do. So we're going to knit up, knit into the back, knit, knit. Oh, now we're going to drop a stitch. This is so much fun. Oh, so we're going to drop the stitch. You might have to use your fingers or something to pull it all the way down, depending on your yarn. If it's a nice silky smooth yarn, it'll probably go of its own accord. So this one, because it's sort of nice and got a bit of fluff to it, just needs a bit of help. Okay. Why is it something when you want it to ladder, it doesn't? Okay, there's a bit of, I can see what's happening there. Something has caught. What is caught? Okay. There's a fibre there that's caught. So that's what I say. You just might have to ease it down. A fluffy yarn is going to be a bit trickier than a silky or a cotton yarn. But you're going to get there in the end. Because I want to show you what happens when you get to that yarn over at the bottom and it doesn't go anywhere. Again, just ease those drop stitches. And then I'm going to show you something else. You can see. There we go. And it's stopped. It's not going to go anywhere you don't want it to go, as long as you put that yarn over in the bottom. And then obviously I would do the same with this one and this one. So that's going to give me what I've got here. But there's something else you could do here if you want to, as a decorative finish, if you choose to. You could use either the same yarn, or I'm going to use a different colour just to show you. This is a kind of cool technique that you might want to just use. So you'll need a yarn needle, okay, tapestry needle, and thread. I'm going to use a contrasting thread so you can see. So you would start from the top down. Ideally you need a multiple of four laddered. I think I've got 22, so I'm a couple out, but it doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to tie a great big knot in this, which I would normally not do, but I want to fasten it some way so I can really show you. This is a hideous knot, but I want to anchor it here. Okay, again, this is just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go from the top down, and I'm going to go under the first two, over those two, and then I'm going to flip that. And then I'm going to pull my yarn through. Okay, let's do it again. Under the first two, over, flip my needle.
I'm not going to pull that up really tight. I'm just going to create sort of a design with it. Under, over, flip. Under, over, flip. Then under, over, flip. Now, you could do that with the same color yarn. You could do it with a really fine ribbon, but it's a nice detail. However you choose to do it. You could tighten that up a little if you wanted, so you see that stitch, but it depends. You don't want to tighten it so much that it distorts the knitting. But you see, it's a really nice, cool way that you could finish off a ribbon or a really nice decorative thread. That would be great, or a decorative yarn. So that's something else you can do if you just don't want all the laddering. Really gives a nice finish. Okay, how cool is that? Okay, I'm going to ask the camera to turn back to me. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Knitter Matters. I really enjoyed doing that. Something really liberating about dropping stitches when you know that you're allowed to, when you can. Okay, so don't forget you get a 20% discount on any Mary Maxim purchase from their website. It'll be, oh, I'm sorry, you can't see that, can you? I'm holding that up. Thinking the camera's, sorry. Okay, you get a 20% discount off a highest price item, whatever you want from their website, as long as you put the code Cheryl in, okay? That's from anywhere. They ship globally, so don't be afraid if you're not in the US. Don't be afraid to have a look at the website. They do some wonderful things. So, as always, this and all episodes of Knitter Matters are uploaded afterwards to this Facebook page. They're also on YouTube, so you can go back and look at the full playlist there. They are, I'm being pointed at by the camera, and I don't know what that means. Okay. Oh, Mabel. Yes, I should have said about Mabel. She's back. Last week she had gone on vacation, so we had her sister Maudine. So Mabel is here. She's decked out in her finery in a new dress. I hope you like that. So, and if you've got suggestions for me to dress Mabel in something knittery, then please let me know what you'd like to see her in. So follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. Keep knitting, stay calm, stay well, keep knitting, and I'll see you next week. Take care now. See you next week. Bye-bye for now.